Drafts in the rear view. Now the real work starts. For the top overall selection, there are more than enough tools to get that job done. An embarrassment of riches, both inherited and added around Caleb Williams, the former Heisman Award winner, making his way to Chicago alongside consensus All-American wideout Rome Odunze, who came off the board just 8 picks later. Our draft recap is presented by Geico. Get more with Geico. Joe Musso alongside Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman here to dive into it all, fellas, and we're starting there at the top of the board. 1-1, Caleb Williams. Chicago, they go offense, a little third phase help, but the story here, picks 1 and pick 9. How do you grade it out, Ryan?
I'm starting with pick 22 in the 4th round, the punter. Huge development for the Iowa football program. But we have to start with Caleb Williams. We have to start with Rome Odunze because that is a franchise-changing development. You start with the franchise quarterback, you circle back and get an incredible playmaker. And Rick, we talked throughout the fall and into the pre-draft process about how good Rome Odunze was for that Washington team and how he could end up being a top 10 pick. Both things came true. Caleb was going to be the first overall forever. There was some back and forth during the fall that maybe Drake May or Jaden Daniels, but I think at the end of the day, it was a pretty easy decision for Ryan Poles. You see the picks here. Kieran Amagaje is a project at 326 coming out of Yale. Just hasn't played a lot of football, but athletically checks the box. And then they only had 4 picks, Rick, but they came back to 144 to get edge rush help because that was something we thought they might do at 9 with Austin Booker out of Kansas. You and I talked that perhaps maybe he should have returned to school, but maybe he takes a redshirt year, as you like to say, and he's their guy going into 2025. All that said, Rick, A+ for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you. They addressed all their needs that they had to address. They went out and got Caleb Williams, check. Rome Odunze, double check.
Oh.
And then the offensive tackle from Yale, that was a project, but it was something that they needed to develop, and they've done that because of the offensive line they currently have and the tackle they currently have up there. The punter, everybody takes a punter. I took too many punters and kickers in my day, so I ended up cutting them, and then they end up going out to be Pro Bowlers. And the last one, they moved back in, giving up a pick next year because they only had 4 picks. But when you watch this kid, he's long, he's athletic, raw, but he showed a lot of tools down at the Senior Bowl. You can see the first step quickness, you can see the length. When we looked at kids like this, our defensive line coach, Andre Patterson, used to salivate when these kids were sitting on the board. He said, I can't teach the size, I can't teach the length, I can teach the technique. And I think this guy's going to be a good player here down the road.
So for Joe, Bears fan, his edification, is it more beneficial, disregarding the financial part of it, but for Austin Booker, does he learn more as a football player year 1, watching and learning, or returning to school?
Well, I always think they should return to school because he's going to make a lot more money if he probably would have came back in the way the NIL is right now.
What about in terms of football progress, growth?
Yeah, no, he's going to grow more, probably coming to the NFL, but he's going to be a little bit less in the pocket by making that decision. And plus, he didn't have a really long track record of playing.
Right. Very few times before have I seen Bears fans rowing in the same direction, that they are right now. Positivity, not something the franchise has known all that much over these last 3 or so decades, but as you said, could be a franchise-altering draft right here for Chicago. We're trying to get more, presented by Geico. How do the Bears get more out of Caleb in year 1 under the tutelage of Shane Waldron?
Joe, knowing you for as long as I have, I am incredibly excited for you and Bears fans because it feels like they're turning the corner. And Rick, you've made selections where you thought, okay, this is going to be a difference maker year 2, 3, 4, 5 down the line. Adrian Peterson comes to mind as someone who can redirect a franchise. Justin Jefferson. But when you get that franchise quarterback, it solves a lot of problems. Patrick Mahomes hides a lot of warts. Josh Allen hides a lot of warts. And it feels like Caleb Williams and the infrastructure around him as a first overall pick, typically those situations are not very good. This feels like best case scenario for him.
Yeah, there's not a better situation that I can remember a rookie quarterback walking into with all the talent around him, with the receivers he has, the running backs, the tight ends. I mean, Gerald Everett is a signing that no one really talks about, but he is a very good receiving tight end to go along with Cole Kmet. So they are set up for success, and they're set up. Like, if we looked at Bryce Young last year, the first overall pick, nowhere near the same talent that Caleb Williams is coming into with the Chicago Bears.
And almost poetically, it was his top target to be that got them that pick from the Chicago Bears. DJ Bourne now a part of that arsenal in Chicago. They add to the third phase with the big leg that was mentioned, and it was a top 5 scoring defense after Thanksgiving last year. We'll see how it all adds up in Chicago. But elsewhere in the North, coming out of day 1, this was the big winner for you, Rick. Minnesota They go J.J. McCarthy after failing to move up to number 3. Does that give you pause or change your grade at all that they had eyes potentially for someone else and do land on McCarthy?
No, because that happens all the time. That's why it's a draft, and it's not.
I'm sure they had eyes on Caleb Williams, but that's not going to happen. You're going to downgrade him.
You can't have him.
Yeah.
Joe's eyes were.
Well, maybe 3 years you may not be saying that.
All right.
And that's yeah. Let him enjoy the moment, Rick, okay? It is the working man's day. I gave the Vikings an A,
okay.
And I think part of the math, and, you know, we've talked about this a lot. J.J. McCarthy, we know he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan, but the pieces are there, the leadership qualities are there. Last year we talked to C.J. Stroud at the Combine, and he changed our opinion in terms of his leadership qualities because we never talked to him. J.J. McCarthy was the exact same way, and I think the added bonus is Kevin O'Connell is going to be the one coaching him up along with Josh McCown, which you pointed out he has a relationship with. Dallas Turner, they traded up to get him. There were clips going around the internet where Kevin O'Connell was shocked that was going to be a development, one in which he was happy about. And then they just keep adding pieces. Rick, Kyrie Jackson, long cornerback out of Oregon. Walter Rouse, I thought he got better after he transferred from Stanford. And those pieces are in place. Will Reichert, who you know from Alabama, adds as a kicker. So I think they got better as a team. And by the way, it's hard to give a team an F unless they just take all long snappers. So they filled needs, and there's potential, and that's what you want to have coming out of the draft.
Yeah, and they were aggressive filling in those needs. They moved up to get J.J. McCarthy just to make sure they secured him, even though it was only one spot. They moved up to go get Dallas Turner. You know, they lost Daniil Hunter. They lost D.J. Wanham. They were able to sign Van Ginkel from Miami. They brought in Grenard from Houston. But in Brian Flores' defense, you have to have pressure on the quarterback, which can alleviate some of the pressure on the secondary, which they needed to address as well, which they did with the Oregon kids. So I think they did a great job, especially in the first round, making sure that they got the quarterback. They couldn't come out of this draft without a quarterback, and they got a legit pass rusher who I thought was the best pass rusher coming out. So that's why I think it was an A.
And the other reason that they're winners, if you want to call them that, they didn't have to trade the 23rd pick. We had said that for weeks, that they're going to have to trade number 11 and 23, perhaps a 25 first rounder to get up to 4 or 5. They keep 23, trade up to 17, and get Dallas Turner.
Let me ask, if that trade would have went, and supposedly it's being reported that they were going to give up 11-23 and a first round pick to go up and get a Drake May, then they wouldn't have got a Dallas Turner. Would you still give him an A?
No, and you've talked about this. If you're only giving up a first rounder for Caleb and a first rounder for Jaden, and then you're giving up 3 for whoever your quarterback is, essentially 3, 2.5, if you want to say that, that already puts you behind the 8 ball because you're getting QB 3 or 4, and then if he doesn't hit, your franchise has no assets going forward in which to get better.
Well, that was the alternate universe, the one that they live in now, still going to look a whole lot different than the Minnesota Vikings we saw a season ago, both sides of the ball there, guys. Let's get to Green Bay because this was a particularly Green Bay approach to the draft. Just one skilled player if you're not counting a flyer on a quarterback late in this draft. Young roster, very capable, very talented. We saw maybe the ceiling of that youth last year, and they're going to try and break through that move forward. I mean, total sum of the parts here, Rye. How do they grade out in your eyes?
Joe, when I think of With the First Pick podcast, which Rick and I do, I think of sexy. When you look at this draft board, Rick, it's not particularly sexy. Jordan Morgan, tackle guard flexibility. Edge Cooper is a special player. He was our linebacker 1. They get him at 45, and that feels like certainly he's going to fill a need there. Javon Bullard, a similar type player in that he's a nickel. He helps in the secondary. He's going to play a little behind Edge Cooper there. And you keep going down the list. They got another linebacker in Teron Hopper out of Missouri. I liked him a lot. You think he needs to use his arms more when he runs, which is a curious scouting report.
Yeah, no, he runs with his arms. He just don't take on blockers with his arms.
And then they got our guy Evan Williams. We were talking about him on day 3. Didn't test well in terms of the speed, but he's a guy that is a thumper coming downhill. And then one of my favorite players. And the overarching takeaway for me, Rick, is that they are not messing around at the second and third levels of the defense with the way they approach this draft after the first round. But Keaton Oladipo out of Oregon State, I've been talking about him for weeks and months. Again, not incredibly side to side, has the elusiveness there, but I think straight line, he's pretty good. And then finally, his name was called, quarterback Michael Pratt.
Yeah, no, this was a defense. This was a Brian Gutekunst type draft, okay? They're not going to take the flashy skill guy on the offensive side of the ball. They're trying to secure the offensive line. They have a new defensive coordinator, and Jeff Hafley was a head coach at Boston College. They're going to go from a 3-4 to a 4-3, so from an odd to an even front. When you do that, you have to have athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So everything that they targeted in that second day on Friday were athletic players that are very good football players, and that's going to help their defense a lot, because that was a little bit of an Achilles heel till they got late in the season. That's why they made the defensive coordinator change.
I mean, I look at all these names, and it looks like competition at camp is what it looks like to me, and we'll see what the Green Bay Packers can do. This NFC North, just a few years removed from it being wide open. I mean, you got something here before we get to Detroit?
I should have led with this. I gave him an A.
You got him an A?
Yeah.
All right. The Detroit Lions, it was corner help early that they targeted in this draft. Just a couple plays, couple decisions, couple minutes away from realizing some goals that they had not ever before, Ryan. Do you feel like they've gotten closer to that being a reality with the addition of these names?
How can you not trust Brad Holmes, future podcast host with the first pick? If he keeps having the success,
If he keeps doing well in the draft, he'll be sitting here in a couple years.
How can you not trust Dan Campbell? How can you not trust Chris Spielman? And the thing, Joe, last year's draft, and Rick and I talked about this last night on the podcast, they went with Jahmyr Gibbs, they went with Jack Campbell, then in the second round, Sam Laporta and Brian Branch. Those weren't necessarily needs that we thought they were going to address. Those turned out to be the right picks.
Home runs.
Similarly, home runs.
Yeah.
Terry and Arnold sitting there at 24. That's a home run. Ennis Rakestraw Jr. has first-round talent, but physically didn't test there. Those are home runs. And Rick, I'll ask you a question that we got last night. Did the Lions lose the draft with those first two picks?
Absolutely not. They needed corner, and that was one of their Achilles heels on the defensive side of the ball. And especially when Cam Sutton got the off-season concerns off the field, they had to release him. So they signed Mosley last year, Emmanuel Mosley, but he was hurt again, tore his ACL, I believe, twice. So they needed to get help on the defensive side of the ball. And maybe the thing that prevented them from getting the Super Bowl, besides just kick the field goal and let's move on in life, they have all these explosive playmakers on offense, but they needed to help the defense. And Aaron Glenn's got to be very happy right now. And when you look down at these lists, every single one of these football players are very good football players. They're smart, they're tough, and they're reliable. And that's what Detroit Lions always draft.
I would imagine they're good people, because that seems to be the starting point of the conversation for the Lions players.
Yeah, and they're reliable. Can you rely on them to line up week in and week out? And we saw that with the rookies last year.
A minus. I need
A
to
minus.
Yes.
A minus, my God.
Lest we never forget, analytics are meant to inform, not to decide. Big decisions were made.
What did you give them last year?
Over these last three.
D.
We look forward, not back, and here is what the future looks like in the NFC North. Plus 140, the Lions, the favorites, to go back-to-back in that division. The Packers next closest. A fall from grace for the Vikings, who were sort of the gatekeepers for a couple years there, or at least preseason appeared to be, and there are the Bears at plus 370, despite a rookie quarterback. More than a fighting chance to be kings of the North. Coming up, a new Q landing in the NFC East, but will it spell success in the nation's capital? More letters coming next on CBS Sports HQ. Washington, give me two. At pick number 2, the Commanders pulling no surprises, selecting reigning Heisman Award winner Jaden Daniels. The franchise quickly retooling under new leadership, 9 picks in all, 4 to the O side, 5 heading to the Commanders' defensive room. Back in the mix, Joe Musso alongside Ryan Wilson, Rick Spielman here to offer grades and analysis for this division. Washington, that's where we start. A volume of picks beyond Daniels as well, but that is the headliner. How does it grade out?
A+. I'll lead with the headline. 6 of their picks were all in the top 2 rounds, and they just hit home run after home run. They're not hitting singles. They're not looking for walks. They're just the fastball is being thrown right down the middle, and they're knocking it out of the park. Jaden Daniels, obviously, he's going to be the day one starter unless something goes sideways. Johnny Newton, first-round talent, slipped into the top of the second there, Rick. And then Mikey Sanders still, the edge rusher, the nickelback we've talked a ton about. Ben Sinnott was one of your favorite players that tied in. And then the last pick of day 2 to end the 3rd round, Luke McCaffrey, who went before some other wide receivers perhaps that we thought, Christian McCaffrey's brother, so you know you have the bloodlines there. And this team looks like it's ready to be serious competitors in the NFC East.
Yeah, I think they're going to turn it around a lot quicker than people think, especially what they did in free agency. I think the one thing that maybe they didn't address was another edge rusher, because they traded both Chase Young and Montez Sweat away. And they signed some guys. They signed a lot of guys. I think they signed over 20 unrestricted free agents, either their own or they brought in from elsewhere, a lot of one-year deals. So this is going to be a quick turnaround, in my opinion. I know Dan Quinn. I worked with him down in Miami. He was actually the defensive line coach for Nick Saban down there. So I know what he brings to the table. If you look at what Adam did on his first draft, I thought he knocked it out of the park. They're very consistent, following their draft board, and we're going to talk about that a little later, Joe, on some of these new GMs and what their philosophies were. But I can tell you, Adam Peters stuck to his board, how they had to develop, and took best players available.
I love the league webs, always intertwined, which makes some of this dealing behind the scenes even more interesting. Giants were trying to get a deal done also to get up to that number 3 pick and land a new quarterback. They do not, but they do add some explosiveness, and they shore up the secondary. I mean, it's been glowing reviews for just about everybody thus far. Do you like what the Giants did?
A-, but only in comparison to the other team in that division that we just spoke about, the Commanders, of course. Malik Neighbors, he was wide receiver 1 for more than a handful of teams, so that feels like stealing at number 6. That means you're rolling with Daniel Jones if you couldn't get the quarterback you wanted, and that perhaps is a good thing. We'll see. Sometimes trading up, oftentimes trading up doesn't work. Tyler Newman, Rick and I spoke with him at the Combine. He is long, he is physical, didn't time well, but I think he can still play center field. I want to hear what you say about that, Rick. And then one of my favorite players in this draft class, Joe, I talked about Ben Sinnott going to Washington. My tight end 3 was Theo Johnson out of Penn State. I think he's a little more dynamic than Rick does, but I think he can come in and contribute and get better as a blocker and a route runner. But he's 6'5", 260, and he ran pretty well. So I like him as an addition to that offense as well.
Yeah, and what they were able to do this offseason, they built up that offensive line. So they're going to they go out and get Neighbors, who to me is the most explosive playmaker at the receiver position with the ball in his hands after the catch. And they're going to give Daniel Jones the best opportunity to say, hey, this is our guy going forward, because of what they did this offseason. If he doesn't succeed, they're going to be probably looking for a quarterback next year's draft. But when you go down to Newman, you go down to Phillips, the corner from Kentucky, they're probably better football players than they are athletes. So if you want to go out and run around in shorts and do all the combine numbers that we try to check all the boxes on our reports, they're probably going to be, they're okay. But then when you watch the tape, they're both very, very good, smart, intelligent football players. And then this is probably one of the tight ends we totally disagree on.
Yeah.
Because this kid went to the combine and he ran what? He jumped what? Yeah. He did what? He did do better down at the Senior Bowl. I thought he stuck out a little bit there. But this was the one that was opposite of the last 2 we talked about. This guy is a much better athlete than football player, in my opinion, right now.
Well, moving on to our next team here, the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman must have the unlimited plan on his phone, because that was an active phone over the last 3 days. 9 trades in all, the most we've seen in 33 years in a single draft. He tucks away a 3rd, 4th, and 5th for next year, and also addresses needs in the secondary. Feels like this was 3D chess. Is it checkmate? Did they win? What do you like here on the Eagles, Ryan?
Right. If you include the future draft picks, it feels like an A+. But just in terms of the haul they got here, I gave them a B, again, relative to the other teams we're going to talk about in this division. I love Quinyon, love Cooper. Those make so much sense, and those are obvious needs. Rick, I want to get your thoughts on Jalix Hunt. Are you overdrafting a project, a former safety from Cornell who's transferred to Houston Baptist to play edge rusher? I thought Will Shipley, he gives you something, but perhaps not as much as you can get from other players at that spot there. I understand that. And I love the Jeremiah Trotter coming back home selection. And you think that Johnny Wilson, the wide receiver, 6'7", 237, does he have to move to tight end given the way he played?
Yeah, I think that Johnny Wilson, they may look as like a tight end or like a Travis Kelce type, that you can split him out, put some weight on him. He just needs to be more consistent catching the ball for his size when he's in contested situations or when he's in a battle for the ball in the air. I do love the way how he revamped the secondary. Jalix Hunt, I watched him. I had a couple tapes. I couldn't believe we had a couple tapes on him. He is as raw as you can get.
Sushi.
Yeah, but it's like I said, I went to the restaurant with a coach one time, and he said, yeah, wipe its rear end, bring its horns out, and I'll just take my meat that way, raw.
That's Jalix Hunt.
That's a perfect description of him. But he's long and he's athletic, and these coaches, when they see these guys with unique physical traits, they think they can fix it. And he doesn't have to come in and compete right away. Right. They went and signed Huff out of the Jets, who's going to be a big-time pass rusher. I know they lost Reddick or who was it that went to Hassan Reddick that went to the Jets, so they kind of flopped pass rushers there. But I thought it was a really good draft.
In other rooms, you can order that black and blue, which is often the brand of football that Philadelphia enjoys. We will see if it is enjoyment in that division. One more to get to here, and Dallas seems notable because following that, you could call it many things, embarrassment at the hands of the Green Bay Packers to end the season. I mean, a bunch of fifth-year seniors slapped you on your home turf. Yeah. Jerry says we're all in. All in all, it's been a bit underwhelming since that statement, but how did they do here in this draft?
And you could say the underwhelming came to a head here with an underwhelming draft in that there was no grand gesture to improve the football team. You have your franchise quarterback. Tyler Guyton makes sense. We'll figure out where he's going to play. He was a right tackle at Oklahoma. Are you going to try him on the left side? That was a conversation during the draft process. Marshawn Nealon is a juiced-up edge rusher. He is long, and he is incredibly physical. We'll see where he fits in. And Cooper Beebe, again, you're checking boxes and trying to improve the offensive line. But for me, Rick, as I mentioned, I gave the Cowboys a B. There was nothing that moved the needle for me in terms of the wholeness of the draft class, where it feels like you could compare it to what the Commanders did, for example, or even what the Eagles did. They filled some needs. They're a better football team, but I don't know if the Cowboys fans have any reason to be any more excited than they were at the start of the preseason.
Yeah, no, and I thought they put a point of emphasis on rebuilding that offensive line. I do like Guyton. I thought that was a great pick for them, where they picked because they had to move back. I think they believe they traded with the Lions, if I'm not mistaken, so the Lions can come up and get their corner. They moved back and still got Guyton, which I think can come in and start immediately. Cooper Beebe, whether he's going to play guard, he's played tackle, he's not a tackle. Maybe they move him into center because they lost their center to the Commanders. So this was kind of like I don't want to say bland, it was just not sexy. You know, there wasn't no. And then the one thing that I thought they would come out of here with was a running back. But then I think Mr. Jones has been talking about the Ezekiel Elliott potential reunion, so maybe that's why they didn't go there. And please don't say that you love the running back, Jonathan Brooks from Texas. We'd love to take him, and then he was the first running back to go off in the second round before the Cowboys could select him.
Not enough seasoning for that steak to go on with this extended metaphor here on HQ. But we'll see what it all adds up to. Our friends at FanDuel adjusting those numbers immediately. Here's a look at the odds to win the East. Co-favorites, the Cowboys and the Eagles. If history is your roadmap, that plus 120 on the boys. Losing money, an 18-year streak of no repeat winner in this division. We'll see if the boys can buck that trend this year. Still to come, it's always an arms race in the NFC West, but who added the firepower to make a move in a division that has run through the Bay? We assess next on CBS Sports HQ. Speak softly and carry a big stick. The heir to the heir, Marvin Harrison Jr., neither saying nor doing much leading up to this year's draft, because when you know, you know. Maserati Marv, the first non-QB off the board at number 4 to Arizona, a new top target for Kyler Murray's offense. Back in studio alongside our insiders and analysts, gentlemen. Little surprise here at number 4, Arizona going the way of Marvin Harrison Jr. They did apparently field calls, but Marv just too good to pass up. How do you grade out the entirety of the draft?
Rick, this is an A+. And as you go down their draft board, and they had a ton of picks, there are a lot of guys that we both loved throughout the draft process, and that obviously skews our grades, but they're filling needs. Their biggest needs were wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback. Their first 3 selections, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback, and even Darius Robinson, who is the edge out of Missouri, perhaps he kicks inside. And some other names that I like to be immediate impact players, Trey Benson, the running back out of Florida State. Kyler Murray has to be happy about that. One of your favorite players, Dadrian Taylor Demerson, the safety out of Texas Tech, goes in round 4. And then another young man that we really loved, Christian Jones, offensive tackle on the right side out of Texas, adds depth there. There's very few things to complain about if you're an Arizona fan right now.
No, they had 12 draft picks. Jonathan Gannon, Drew Petzing, Nick Rawlis, the defensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator. Did you know, Joe, all were quality control guys with me in the Minnesota Vikings.
I do know now, and I know where the success comes from, obviously.
But no, I thought Monty Ossenfort knocked it out of the park. I can tell when I watch these personalities of these GMs, and if the personality of the head coach is involved in these picks. And every one of these guys, another guy that you didn't mention I love is Isaiah Adams, who played right tackle at Illinois. They'll kick him inside at guard. He's another bar room brawler. You just put him in the middle and let him go to work in there. And like you said, Taylor Demerson, to me, I think is the Gardner Johnson what Gannon had when he was in Philadelphia. So I thought all these rookies are going to come in and contribute. I imagine all of them are going to make the team, and I bet you're going to get 4 or 5 starters out of this.
Wow. I mean, over the last half decade, a lot of premium capital in Arizona. A couple different leading groups. The quarterback, we'll see if he can reach his ceiling now with that big target around him as well in Marvin Harrison Jr. We got to get to Seattle because when I look at this, again, it's the first name that they select that obviously jumps off the board biggest at me, Byron Murphy. As day one impact players go, that shores up the middle of that defense immediately, Ryan. A part of this grade, but in totality, where are we?
I gave them an A. Again, if you're checking boxes in terms of filling the needs and with players that make sense in the positions in which you're drafting, okay. And Byron Murphy, he was a top 10 talent for me, and I think Rick liked him nearly as much. Christian Haynes, that is a young man you do not want to meet in a dark alley or in a well-lit alley. He is going to get his hands on you, and that's going to be over. There's a fun incident from the Senior Bowl in which Jordan Jefferson from LSU took his helmet off and chucked it in the stands, and Christian Haynes said, now what? I mean, he was not going anywhere. And A.J. Barner, the blocking tight end out of Michigan, another Michigan player off the board, Rick. These feel like John Schneider-type players. These feel like guys that will bite your head off and continue to do what you want them to do on the football field. How can you not love this draft class?
Yeah, no, to get Brian Murphy II where they got him, I think he's going to be an impact player right away. Christian Haynes, the only knock on him is he's probably a one-position guy only. He's only a guard, but if you're going to draft only a guard, you know he's going to step in and start right away. I like Knight, the linebacker, because they also needed Brooks left in free agency, so Wagner left as well. Wagner's in the Commanders now. But this kid, I mean, if he can come under control, he's kind of like a blind dog in a butcher shop all over the place.
I like that one. I like that one.
But he can make plays. And the one guy that I really thought that got great value in the 6th round was DJ James, a corner from Auburn, because I think he can play inside and out. I think he's going to really help them in coverage. So kudos to John Schneider and new head coach Mike McDonald. And you can tell that Mike McDonald, when they took Brian Murphy II, that's Metabike. That's what make the engine go on their defense, and they got one that can do that.
I'm just waiting for faster than a small-town rumor to come out of you here.
That's a good one.
In the not-too-distant future. We got to roll on here. Our next stop is a place we haven't seen many picks. We know the Rams' draft strategy as it pertains to picks cannot be repeated here. Finally, they had some. How did they do with that capital?
And even though they didn't have the first-round picks going back to the advent of the Sean McVay here in L.A., they were still crushing the subsequent picks, and last year's draft class was an A++ in retrospect. So I can only assume, Rick, that this has to be similar. I gave him an A just to bring down the level at which we're talking about how good the Rams are, less need Sean McVay drafting these guys. But Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, teammates at Florida State. They're going to be teammates in L.A., and they're going to play a lot early on. Blake Corum and that backfield with Kyren Williams, I love the thought of that. He's a little faster than Kyren, but Kyren's plenty fast enough in that offense. Cam Kitchens, I think it speaks to sort of the Puka Nacua situation that Cam ran in the 4.6s, Puka ran in 4.5s. They don't care, the Rams don't. They care how fast you play. Cam Kitchens, the safety, plays much faster than he timed. And finally, I'll mention Brendan Jackson, who our buddy Pete Prisco talks their ears off about. I liked him on day 3. That's where he ended up going. He's the juiced-up edge rusher out of Washington State.
Yeah, no, I thought they addressed the defensive side of the ball. They feel very confident with the offensive side. But getting Blake Corum to go ahead and team up with Williams, I think that shows you that it's an emphasis. They want to run the ball. They just don't want Matthew Stafford to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. And can Cooper Kupp stay healthy for 17 games? And we know what Puka Nacua did. So I think they're going to put a point of emphasis on running the ball, controlling the clock a little bit, and continue to play defense the way they've played the last couple of years. It'll be interesting to see, though, without Raheem Morris at the helm, if they have any type of drop-off, because I thought Raheem, for all those players they got last year, did a phenomenal job developing those no-name rookies to become pretty household names right now.
That's a shot at Kobe Turner.
Is that reading between the lines there? No doubt. You do have Michigan and Notre Dame in the same running back room. Could Could be some spirited competition there. I know it's a
spirited. I love it.
Rivalry of old age. Bring it back. Jared Verse, notably the first rounder since Jared Goff in LA. So we'll see how it all pans out for those Rams. 49ers, the last to get to here in this division. 2 wide receivers, one early, one later. Largely panned as a reach, that first wide receiver, but the big playability, the catch radius for a smaller player. Ricky Pearsall, it was the understanding that maybe this was the fill-in for Brandon Ayuk, but here we are post-draft. All of those names still on the roster at last check. How's it grade out?
Well, Brandon Ayuk reportedly was excited to have Ricky Pearsall, his former team,
I would be.
State, right? So he apparently has no intentions of leaving either. You can see here, Ricky Pearsall. Some people might think this is an overreach here, Joe. The man to my left loves this. He, in fact, one of the $1 bets we made on the podcast, 33.5. His draft slot, he took the under, Rick did. So I gave him a B, again, relative to the rest of the division. Renardo Green, Rick liked him a little more than I did. I thought he's a little too handsy at times, but Rick says you can coach that out of the player. Isaac Garendo, later there on day 3, ran in the 4.3s. I didn't think he played that fast, and I thought he went down a little too easy for a bigger back. And Jacob Cowan is the young man that we liked during the fall, and I thought he had a really good Senior Bowl, a slot receiver for Arizona Wildcats.
Yeah, and this team is pretty loaded to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think they're just going off of getting good football players, and that's what John Lynch, that's how Adam Peters learned from John Lynch, and that's why the Commanders had such a successful draft. But Pearsall, okay, to me that says probably if Ayuk wants $25, $30 million, okay, we'll play out this year. Let's go try to win a Super Bowl, then go get your money after. So I think some of these picks are picks for the future as well. You know, even Jacob Cowing, who we both loved, is a little slot receiver who's extremely explosive and is going to able to get underneath with that type of system that Kyle Shanahan runs. And the other one that I really liked was Dominic Puna, who we saw down at the Senior Bowl. He was a left tackle at Kansas. They moved him in at guard center. He needs to bend a little bit better, but they needed some offensive line help as well. And I think he'll come in and compete for a starting job.
Yeah, for that front office, for every Trey Lance, there are about 5 or 6 Warner, Juszczyk, Hufanga. I mean, they hit home runs later in drafts with eyes on the future. Look to be the strategy once again from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. Plenty more coming here on CBS Sports HQ as we take a look at the odds to win the West, minus money. It's the Niners or bust. Well, not bust. There's plenty of value there beyond the Niners. 8-1 specifically to the Seahawks. 12-1 for the Cardinals to make the biggest jump you can. The Rams next closest at plus 350. Still to come, the NFC South seemingly always for the taking, but who made the greatest strides over these last 3 days? We explore next on CBS Sports HQ. Well, the kid can spin it. Apparently the front office can too. The 8th overall pick requiring some explanation. A month removed from guaranteeing Kirk Cousins 9 figures, the Atlanta Falcons spending prime capital on Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., a successor some seasons off for a prospect that will be 24 a week from Wednesday. Back in studio, Joe Musso alongside Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman, and we're a couple days removed from the pick, and I still don't get it. Some of the smarter minds around the league have explained it in certain terms, but the 8th overall pick for a project that we won't see come to fruition for some time, a prospect that many touted as the most pro-ready. How could you not give this a failing grade?
Well, for the purpose of our conversation here, Joe, failing's going to have to be C. That's the lowest grade I give. So
fair enough.
Grade on a curve.
I'm taking your classes.
It wasn't a grade.
A pass-fail, but it's all pass, pass, pass.
Yeah, well, this is as close to fail as you're going to get. They did check some boxes, and they did solve some issues. Raheem Morris, we've talked about this, Rick. The first quarterback he drafted when he was the head coach of Tampa Bay was Josh Freeman. So quarterback isn't necessarily a surprise in that sense, but taken in totality of what the Falcons needed to do, they did take 5 players on the defensive side of the ball. But when you look at the picks they had, they picked Penix 8th. They could have had Byron Murphy. They could have had Dallas Turner. I've since learned that they were off Dallas Turner, so Leatu Latu perhaps is an option. They took Ruka Roro. You see that there at 35. They could have had Johnny Newton, Braden Fisk, Christian Braswell. edge Cooper. So there were other options that you keep coming back to as you look who was drafted after these players were taken. And I know what you may say, Rick, well, they had these guys graded higher, but it all starts with Michael Penix Jr. And to reiterate for the umpteenth time, Joe, this isn't about Michael Penix Jr. It's about what are the Falcons trying to do in the short term. It seems in the long term, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be in their plans.
Yeah, and I just thought with everything they were able to accomplish this offseason, putting that team together to come out not only win the NFC South, but maybe advance in the playoffs, that the draft didn't indicate what they did during the offseason. And that's by, drafting Michael Penix Jr. And again, we all both love Michael Penix Jr. It's just weird. But then some of the defensive moves, I think, and Ryan, on your big board and how your mock drafts, which I follow truly to the T, you had some of these.
That almost felt genuine.
There's no sarcasm over here. There were some better options, I would say, out there. I mean, Braylon Trice, he's a good try-hard effort guy. A lot of his sack production comes off a second effort. The two guys that I really liked, and I thought they got better down here, was Dorless, the defensive tackle from Oregon who can play base end. I think he's going to be a really good inline pass rusher by the time it's said and done. And my favorite linebacker, J.T. Bertland out of Notre Dame. If you watch the USC game, he's making plays all over the field. And everybody's going to say he's not big enough, or he can't do this, he can't do that. The number one key to a successful linebacker is instincts. And this is one of the most instinctful linebackers I saw in the draft this year.
Is this comp Chris Spielman, or is that too rich?
No.
Okay, I just had to ask.
Drew Tranquil was the name that came to mind, sort of a backer type for Notre Dame that has played different roles in the NFL. I'm not sure if that's
you know who I thought traveled together? Him and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I thought both undersized guys, but very instinctive, that overcomes some of their lack of physical abilities. Yeah. That makes sense?
Just to double back one deeper here on the Penix situation and decision. Jordan Love, the comp, the secession plan was sort of put into place as a explanation for this. Love was drafted 26th overall. You could sell that to a fan base. 8th overall, the capital there. And
well, the other thing is you had just signed Kirk Cousins.
Certainly.
Aaron Rodgers had been there.
Kirk Cousins, the out is after year 3. If they want to get off him in year 2, you have a $35 million dead cap hit in year 3, which will make it impossible to put enough talent around Michael Penix Jr. in what will be his first year as a starter. I don't see it, just me. We got to move on here. The Saints are up next, and I know you had Spencer Rattler ranked higher than others did. That is his eventual landing place after the longest quarterback drought from pick 12 to pick Rattler that we'd seen in the common draft era. I know there was other things done before this for those Saints. What do you make of both the Rattler decision, how he situates there, his opportunity, and their draft as a whole?
First off, I'll give the Saints an A for what they did throughout the draft here, not just because of the Spencer Rattler pick, Rick. And if pick 199 is known as the Tom Brady pick, Rick, I'm going to plant my flag. Going forward, round 5, pick 15 will be known as Rattlerville. So just keep that in mind as we go through this.
Let me write that down.
Yeah,
how do you spell Rattlerville?
So look.
Get the anti-venom.
Yeah, I love it. Telly Fuaga, we've talked forever that they need offensive line help. Olaf Ashanu was gone. Mickey Loomis didn't have to trade up, so he's going to be potentially a day one starter, have an opportunity to at least compete. Kool-Aid McKinstry, first-round talent, and then Spencer Rattler. I had him as a third-round pick. I think he was 85th or so on my board. He falls to 150. And then a guy that we've talked a lot about, Rick Bubmean, straight line speed, big target. Maybe a little Marcus Colston in this game. I don't know what the future may be in terms of where they want to line him up. And one last name I'll mention, Shrine Bowl participant Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa did not get a combine invite. I think this is a steal here at the bottom of the draft.
Yeah, no, I loved him when I watched this tape because he's a big physical nose tackle that does have some pass rush ability. But I was surprised he didn't go to the combine because of what you've seen at the East-West Shrine game. And it was also in the Hula Bowl. Okay. And I watched some of the Hula Bowl tape there, and he was dominant there. So this is a small school kid, and one of those stories, I bet, that, hey, I wasn't good enough to get invited to the combine, but I'm going to make a pretty good career in the NFL.
Yeah, if you can find that value that late in this draft, you end up looking like a genius. Tampa Bay, that front office inking their quarterback and then making it obvious, putting some help around him. Got a center immediately to help out Baker out in front. A few more pieces, including running back depth and Bucky Irving. I like what they did here. I know I'm not giving out the grades, but it seemed like there was a plan in place and executed to the nth degree.
Yeah, I've joked about this before this week, Joe, that Rick and Pete Prisco like to make fun of me because I love everyone, but I do. There's hard not to. And I give Tampa Bay an A. You talk about Graham Barton, left tackle at Duke. He's going to kick inside. Ryan Jensen had to retire. Rick is very familiar with Chris Braswell. He knows him from Alabama. And it's no surprise that Todd Bowles is going defense there in rounds 2 and 3, Rick. Tyke Smith is a young man that we also liked a lot. Great value with Jalen McMillan, former teammate, of course, of Michael Penix Jr. And then Bucky Irving, who is a dynamic back. Didn't time well, but I thought he was a twitchier, one-cut-and-go type of player that can make you miss and then rip off long runs.
Yeah, no, I thought they followed. This was another. Jason Light always follows his board. And they spent most of the offseason trying to get their own back. They signed Baker Mayfield. They extended Mike Evans, so they wanted to keep as much of that team together as possible. And then you can go get a Graham Barton in the first round that I think will come in and start right away for him. You can get a Chris Braswell. Todd Bowles is always looking for edge rushers, and they got Yaya Diaby last year out of Louisville, and so I think they got a couple really nice young pass rushers coming off the edge. Tyke Smith, everybody was talking about Bullard, and this kid was kind of an unknown, but when you watch him, sometimes when you're watching, I couldn't tell the difference between the two with their style of play. So I thought they did a great job in filling some needs with some young guys and continue to build that roster. But they were also, because they've been in cap, can I say heck?
You can say heck.
Okay, cap hack ever since Tom Brady because they had so much dead money last year. But they were able to come out of it, and they were able to win the NFC South last year, even though Jason Light had his hands tied. So I think they're coming out of that. They're going to add another great draft class. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to me now, past the Atlanta Falcons as a potential winner or repeat winner of the NFC South.
One layer below cap hack is wherever the Carolina Panthers are right now. Bryce's Inferno, currently the situation there. They lost this draft last year, but how did they do with what they had?
Yeah, they did, and I would imagine that the ownership does not want to revisit those moments in retrospect. Fun fact, guys, I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, and I mentioned that because their first pick, they traded up to 32 to get Xavier Legette, is from South Carolina. And if you want to have an enjoyable draft moment, go listen to his press conference because he is as country as it comes, and it is refreshing. And more than that, Rick, he's 6'2", 6'3". He ran in the 4.3s. He's a big catch machine down the field. He can stack defensive backs. All of the things that Bryce Young did not have a year ago. So I would imagine Bryce is excited. Bryce also should be excited by their next pick. And you talked about Jerry Jones tipping his hand with Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas. He's now going to be a Carolina Panther. And then I'll mention Jatavian Sanders staying on the opposite side of the ball. You don't draft Jatavian Sanders to block anyone, but you do draft him to be a problem in the middle of the field, and he has some athleticism. I thought he might go a little higher than day 3, but again, great news for Bryce Young in that offense.
Yeah, they got a couple weapons for Bryce. I think they're going to want to put an emphasis on running the ball. Jonathan Brooks, once he's healthy, I think he can be one of the best running backs in this league, the way he showed on tape this year. So, notch below Bijan Robinson, notch below Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's going to be a very good running back, and then put him with the running backs they have down there. It'll set up play-action pass for Bryce and his ability, and that's what Dave Canales wants to do. He had a lot of success with Baker Mayfield last year. I expect Bryce Young is very happy that Dave Canales is the head coach down there.
Just for clarity's sake,
B+.
Our professor here, B+. Okay.
Got caught up in the Xavier Legette story there.
Kind are the eyes of our Ryan Wilson, a B+ for Carolina. Again, just grading with what they had here. Let's take a look at those odds to win the always available NFC South. It's sort of like, this is the 4-way stop. Everybody gets there same time. No, you go. You go. You go. Week 13 rolls around.
Did the Panthers,
all right, I'll go.
Did the Panthers break down in this 4-way stop?
They might not have wheels. They're on blocks right now. 14-1 to win a very winnable division.
So if I put $1 on, I can win $1,400?
We will explain wagering to the great Rick Spielman on another day. For now, we got more draft grades to get to. Coming up, we shift our focus to the AFC, where New England may have a new future. Plenty more coming on CBS Sports HQ. Back on CBS Sports HQ, QB3 in this year's draft, expected to be QB1 at some point in New England. The learning curve could be steep for the new Pats QB Drake May, but a commitment beyond 3 overall, with the Pats retooling an underperforming offense from a year ago. Back in the mix alongside Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman. I'm your host, Joe Musso, here offering draft grades and some analysis beyond it. Drake May, no secret at 3. The secret was, would the Patriots trade out of that pick? We had a lot of interest in it, but they stand pat, turned down a whole bunch of ones, and got their quarterback of the future. That and beyond, how do they grade?
I think the fact that they stood pat is a good thing. I gave him a B- overall, not because of Drake May. That's the pick you have to make it number 3 there. Rick, I'd imagine you're answering the phone calls, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not competing consistently, even if Jacoby Brissett's your guy for 1 year.
Especially if the owner's sitting right next to you saying, take Drake May.
That solves a lot of issues. You just unplug the phone and pretend like you're talking, knowing full well.
Yeah. No, okay, well, yeah. No.
But things changed my opinion a little bit, Rick, and we've talked about this on the podcast. They traded down, passed on Ladd McConkey early in the second, took Jalen Polk. Jalen Polk's a really good player out of Washington, but I think Ladd McConkey offers more immediate productivity. We'll see. We'll find out together. They circled back and got Javon Baker, the Alabama transfer to UCF, and he offers some downfield potential. I understand the picks in between there along the offensive line. I thought that's about where those players would go off the board. And I love the Jaheim Bell pick at the very end there, the tight end who has a ton of upside, wasn't consistent either at South Carolina or when he transferred to Florida State. But when you're a team that's in last place in this division, does Joe Milton make sense when you have other needs?
Yeah, no. The reason they probably took him was because of Drake May, because of Brissett, but he can potentially be on your practice squad.
Okay.
And if you have enough quarterbacks in that room, there's always injuries that occur. Look at, now they didn't spend 3 first-round picks like San Francisco did.
Yeah.
They gave up a 6th-round pick. Maybe down the road they can flip it for a 4th-round pick, especially if he plays well in the preseason. Everybody knows
Good point.
and done their work on him. So it may be just a trade asset or just another asset in your toolbox that you can potentially flip for a better draft pick.
Yeah, in the 6th round, building out some depth there in the quarterback room. I'm so intrigued by this division, and it was last year having the conversation of could the Dolphins catch the Bills. It's a different looking Bills team. You got Aaron Rodgers back for the Jets. The Dolphins looking to get back to that place and then some. But let's go to the Jets next because they got some help for the quarterback in Aaron Rodgers as we look to get more than those 4 plays we saw a season ago and hopefully in good health here. This is a team that's ready to win right now. How did they add to that group in your eyes?
Well, we all thought that maybe Aaron Rodgers was going to have a conversation with the higher-ups, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, and target a skill position player, whether it were Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze, should he be there. We don't know what those conversations were, but it didn't matter because Joe Douglas took the best player available in Ola Fashanu, fills an enormous need. He's going to have a chance to play right away. And then you get Malachi Corley. He's not going to beat you down the field. That's not his game, but you have Garrett Wilson for that. But he provides an alternative in the middle of the field. He's a guy you get the ball in his hands into the line of scrimmage, and he runs through arm tackles on his way to the end zone. And Rick, you might even argue they took 3 running backs in this class, if that's how you classify Malachi Corley in the middle of the field, because Braylon Allen was the next pick. He's a big, strong running back. Didn't run particularly well time-wise, but you see him outrunning defenders down the field. Then they got Isaiah Davis, another running back that I liked out of South Dakota State, added depth to the quarterback position with Jordan Travis. And perhaps the most exciting pick in terms of a young man we didn't see a lot because he played in Canada, Quantez Stiggers, who played at Lane College, went to the Shrine Bowl, and got himself drafted in round 5.
Yeah, and he's a tremendous athlete and another one of those guys you take a swing at late in the round because he has unique physical ability and let the coaches try to develop him, see if he can hit on something. But I liked what Joe Douglas did. I thought if they went Brock Bowers, for example, that they're just pushing all their chips in this year and then everything's going to blow up. But I thought each one of these picks, Fashanu, Corley, Allen, were also building for the future too. So I thought he did a great job balancing between that line of winning now, but also not leaving the cupboard bare next year.
Next up, the aforementioned, Fish, the Miami Dolphins, adding to a rush group that saw injury a year ago really derail what that defense was early. I mean, you lost a linebacker, you lost 2 edges, you lost just about everything throughout that season for this Miami defense. Chop Robinson adding not just depth, but firepower when at full health for this rush group.
A-, and this team is all about athleticism, Rick. Even in a league full of great athletes, it feels like Miami Dolphins has the market cornered. And Chop Robinson, Patrick Paul, I get those selections. I think I like Patrick Paul a little more than you did along the offensive line. But let's start with Jalen Wright, who is going to be probably the 4th or 5th fastest player on that roster somehow, even though he ran in the 4.3s. Malik Washington gives you juice in the slot. He had a great season for a UVA team that wasn't very good, if we're being honest, but he stood out. And even Mo Kamara, who was drafted in between those two, the edge rusher out of Colorado State, he has some juice as well. So it feels like we're getting all the athletes we can. We're going to stockpile the edge position because we have some injuries there, both early and late, and then we're going to get skill position players and let Tua just decimate these guys with the short passes.
Yeah, and I love what Chris Greer did, especially with the edge rushers, because you got Phillips coming off an Achilles, you got Chubb, who's had durability concerns. They lost Van Ginkel up to go to Minnesota, so they need to get edge rush help. And Anthony Weaver's a new defensive coordinator down there. He's going to implement that Baltimore Ravens defense. All these type of picks are what Anthony Weaver wants to see and what type of players he wants on that defensive side of the ball. Not Vic Fangio, because he was only there 1 year. This draft was tailored towards Anthony Weaver and the style of play they're going to be on defense. And the other one I just want to mention, Patrick Paul, you're right, I don't like him as much as you do, so good point there.
Okay. What else you got?
And Jalen Wright, who made me...
You loved him.
I loved him coming out, and I don't know if there's going to be ever a faster team assembled. I mean, look at what you got. You got Mostert, you got A-Chain, you got Wright, you got Hill, you got Waddle. Is there a team out there faster or ever been assembled as fast as the Miami Dolphins are right now?
Well, Mike McDaniel, a big part of the ascension and the building of the San Francisco 49ers as the run game coordinator, a mind that was valued in that room. And you see speed ruling the day now in Miami. We'll see what they look like and if they can stay healthy this season. Can I take you back to Cap Hack? Can we go back to Cap Hack?
Yeah,
The Buffalo Bills were in Cap Hack, and that's why the roster is going to look a whole lot different next year. Also getting some of that descent out of the room, if you will, but you also lose a top-tier target in Stephon Diggs. But there to fill that role, or maybe the role of Gabe Davis, looking to do a little bit of both, is their first pick. It was round 2, pick 1, Keon Coleman, the wide receiver out of Florida State, headlining a handful of picks on both sides of the ball here. Ryan, how do they grade?
A-, and I raised my hand and plead guilty. Rick told me to exercise patience in round 1 when the Bills traded down twice. Bills fans nor I listened in the moment, but I now apologize because they got Keon Coleman, who is going to be a really good football player, replace a Gabe Davis type. He's only 21. He's going to get better. And then you just keep going down the list, Rick, and you're getting guys that are really good at great value. Dwayne Carter, they get a center in Van Pran Granger out of Georgia. Javon Solomon is a sawed-off edge rusher, 2-point stance guy out of Troy that we saw at the Senior Bowl. And I actually love the Daquan Hardy pick, maybe a little more than where they got Cole Bishop at 60. But the value, Rick, feels like just time and time again, Brandon Beane apparently knows a little bit more than I do about putting together a roster.
Yeah, no, and he is, to me, dealt with Brandon. We did the Stephon Diggs trade together, and I have the utmost respect for him and his personnel. And when you're sitting in that chair, it's like everybody, it's just like instant reaction all the time. It's like, I don't think we play until maybe September.
Right.
I don't know if we were playing next week or not. I know the season started then. So as the great Aaron Rodgers said, relax, people. We got this. Let him do his job. I thought he did a great job checking off all the needs as he went down through his roster, replaced everything that he had to let a lot of very key players go that were great leaders, and he brought in guys that are going to replace those guys and contribute to the Buffalo Bills next year.
Would you ever, going home, you go home Thursday night, long night, you go to bed as soon as you get home. In the morning, are you reading the newspaper to see what people are saying about the Vikings in the first round, or you don't care?
You know, to get us serious here for a second.
Oh, okay, I'm ready for this.
Yeah. I didn't pay attention to it, but when you don't do something the fans want to do, and you come home and your daughter's crying because everybody's attacking her on social media and what a dumb nitwit your dad is. I hate to see that for the kids, because people don't realize you can give me everything you want, okay? That's my job. That's part of what you sign up, okay, the criticism. But when you go attack family members and they attack your kids on their social media accounts, what the heck's your dad doing? That's where I think it gets, where it does get upsetting.
That is a heady weight to bear for these executives who are just trying to put together teams that can see success. The Bills' success limited by the Kansas City Chiefs, and those two ended up on the phone together over the last 3 days as well. We will go there next, but first a look at the odds to win that division. It does still belong to Buffalo, according to our friends at FanDuel. That's 1.5 to 1, Rick. Plus 150, the Bills to win the division.
Take your breath.
So was that $1 for 150 bucks?
Well,
I'll give you $1 to put on for me,
sort it out by day's end. The Dolphins expected to be right there at the top as well. The Jets at plus 240, presenting some value for those who believe in East Rutherford. Pats, work to do. Coming up, the back-to-back champs showing no signs of slowing down. In fact, somehow they got faster. Could others in that division gain ground with a new QB? How the West was won next on CBS Sports HQ. Back on CBS Sports HQ, Broncos country on a new ride. A surprise to some with super senior Bo Nix the object of Sean Payton's attention. Nix nabbed at 12 and soon to be tasked with leading a cash-strapped, Broncos roster into their rebuild. We're working on things as well. Joe Musso alongside Ryan Wilson, Rick Spielman here to assess the Broncos first and foremost. Nix at 12 felt like a reach to some, but Sean Payton identified his guy, loves the mind of Bo Nix, and maybe a coming-of-age tale over these next couple of years, Nix and beyond. What did you like most?
I gave the Broncos a B-, and you talk about Bo Nix. Is it a stretch? Clearly, the Broncos didn't think so. George Payton and Sean Payton. You talk about super senior Bo Nix. But the issue for me, Rick, is that he's the 6th quarterback taken in this draft. But a 12th pick is what is also hard to wrap your head around. And typically, first-round quarterbacks work out at about a 50% hit rate. So there's a pretty good chance that Bo Nix and 2 other young men in the first round won't work out at the quarterback position. But I did love the Jonah Ellis pick. I've been talking about him for some time. I think he's a juiced-up edge rusher. As Rick informed me, he has family ties to football in the league. Troy Franklin had a chance to go higher. I thought he slipped a little bit. We talked about Ennis Rakestraw, the cornerback out of Missouri. His teammate, Chris Abrams-Strain, was also a really good player. And then Audric Estime. He's going to bring some toughness. He's not a burner, but I think between the tackles, he can get you a little bit.
Yeah, when you read some of the clips and how they're describing the Bo Nix pick, it was like a Sean Payton arrogant pick. Because you can disagree with me, and I'm going to prove you're wrong. So there are things that I think Sean saw, what he did with Drew Brees. But the other question is, what other quarterback has he had success with, like a Drew Brees? So it didn't have it with Jameson Williams, I would say. So, but Teddy Bridgewater went down there and was like 5-0 when he had to play for Drew Brees.
Who drafted him?
I did, but don't worry about it. We're not talking about me. We're talking about these teams. But you're right. Jonah Ellis is actually one of Luther Ellis's 10 kids, I believe. He adopted a lot of kids. Luther Ellis was our 1st or 2nd round pick when I first started scouting up with the Detroit Lions out of Utah. Great family, great kid. Troy Franklin, I described you as a weaver. You're still getting over that. I'm sure you went back and told your wife, hey, hon, Rick keeps saying these guys are weavers.
In other words,
he's not a really sharp route runner, but he has vertical speed. He can go up and get the ball, and they're going to marry him and Bo Nix together.
This is not about my tape either. Sean Payton, nice enough to sit with us in Las Vegas. Myself, Pete Prisco, had a great conversation with Coach. This was prior to Russ leaving that franchise, and we talked about the importance of that win over Kansas City to build the belief, get things headed in the right direction for that franchise. They will now follow in the steps of their new quarterback in Bo Nix. We'll see how it all adds up. Those Chiefs, they somehow got better as well. Answered the phone, moved up, added speed. What was the issue last year? Drop balls, wide receiver? Well, they got a game breaker here with their 1st overall pick at 28th overall. Xavier Worthy out of Texas and beyond. You love this draft, Ryan.
A, I give it an A, and I just can't give it an A+ because they have everything already. It's like, Rick lives on his island in the mansion. I don't want to go give him a Rolls Royce, so I give him a souped-up Honda. So this is a souped-up Honda.
Okay.
And Xavier Worthy's driving, really fast in the souped-up Honda. 4.21 speed. We saw that at the Combine. He's 6'1", 172. He plays tougher than that size, but Rick has concerns with the size, and he can talk about that. Kingsley Sumatea, I heard they had some interest in him. He has right tackle, left tackle versatility, and they get a bargain. There were some conversations that he'd be a top 50 pick. Rick's guy, Jared Wiley, tight end, and that got my attention, Rick. Talk to me about Jared Wiley going to a team that also has Travis Kelce, what that offense is going to look like.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I mean, the one thing that Kansas City had to do was improve that receiver room, and it's unfortunate that Rashee Rice had to go through and do what he did this offseason because he's probably going to miss maybe 5 to 6 games, depending on what happens when the suspension comes down from the league. But Xavier Worthy, if you want to call him Tyreek Hill, I think that's what you're referring to. I don't know if he has the same hands as Tyreek Hill. I did catch a few glimpses on tape that there were drops, and he does have to clean them up, but there's no question about now him and Hollywood Brown vertically stretching the field, and when Rice comes back, that's going to be a heck of a combination. But the tight end, Wiley, the TCU kid, I liked him as a blocker. I loved him as a pass catcher and an athletic tight end that's 6'6", 240-some, ran into 4.6s. Reminded me a little of a poor man's Travis Kelce.
The draft is one thing. Player development is the next step, and few do it better than this franchise currently in Kansas City. They're going to get the most out of these guys, whatever those ceilings are. The Raiders, on the other hand, player development and draft often coming into question here. It's a franchise that goes about their business the way they want under a number of different front offices. Head scratchers are the theme. Did you see a through line to this draft strategy this season, Ryan?
No, to hesitate.
You could say no.
Answer. Yeah. It felt ebbed and flowed, maybe is the way to put it. I gave him a B-. The Brock Bowers pick, he's a top 10 pick, and much the same way we talk about Michael Penix Jr. being a really good football player. The fit is where you question what's going on, especially given that they drafted Michael Mayer in round 2. I know that Luke Getsy, the new offensive coordinator, likes to run 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, so that part I get. I love Jackson Powers-Johnson there. I actually was really high on Delmar Glades. I thought he might go at the end of day 2, and that's what happened. We talked to Tommy Eichenberg, incredibly soft-spoken, Rick, but he plays with an edge. And Dylan Lobby out of New Hampshire, we saw him down at the Senior Bowl, and he's a good player. I just wondered about the athleticism. They did fill some needs along the offensive line, which they had to do. They got some cornerback help, but only on day 3, so I don't know how much better they are compared to the other teams in that division.
Yeah, I know Tom very well. In fact, we were co-chairs of the GM committee that was a subcommittee off the competition committee, if you can put all those.
That's a lot of committees. That's a busy man.
Yeah. But Tom, I think, does very well what he does. He's going to truly follow his board. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, Joe, on some of the things that I observed. But Brock Bowers was just too good of a talent to pass up. Jackson Powers-Johnson, we all thought, and I thought he was going to go in the first round, and I really loved him because he thought that I dressed with drip when he had him on the stage. I don't know what drip means, but apparently it means it's a compliment. I wasn't as high on Glaze as you was. I thought that he struggled down at the Senior Bowl, especially when they moved him inside the guard. And then Eichenberg is just an old school, 2-down Mike football player. So he followed his board. A lot of times, GMs, the first time they get to work with a new scouting staff, you struggle a little bit because you don't know how they grade, so you're trying to grade and try to put all the grades together. Until you work for a couple of years, it's just like anything else. You get to know each other. I knew that if this scout said this about a receiver, I'm going to go the opposite way because he was horrible with the receiver, but I did respect what he said.
That sounds familiar, by the way.
It happens. Rick, I know we're teaching you some wagering terminology here over the hour and then some. I know you know how over-unders work because there was a wager on the With the First Pick podcast as it pertains to the Chargers draft, and well, you could tell who the winner was. Over, under 2.5 Michigan players drafted by Coach Harbaugh to LA. Sharp number set by producer Debo. It comes in at 2. 7th round, 33rd pick in that round. Cornelius Johnson, the wide receiver out of Michigan, makes it 2 to go along with Junior Colson, the linebacker from the national champions. Joe Alt off the top here. Hard to argue with. Certainly the type of player that Harbaugh was trying to bring into this facility.
The luck I've had, or the lack of luck I've had in these $1 bets, I would not have been surprised that Jim Hart traded up after pick 253.
Get another one in there.
One more
Sneak one more.
I tried to text him to see if he would do that. I said, I have $1 on this and you get 3 Michigan players.
Help me out here.
So I gave the Chargers an A-. The Joe Alt pick, I get it, man. He's such a good football player, dominant at Notre Dame. I just wonder the right tackle, left tackle conversation, because he's a left tackle only, at least before he made his way to Los Angeles. Ladd McConkey, home run. There's no one happier, I would imagine, than Justin Herbert. Junior Colson is an absolute baller in the middle of that defense. And Cam Hart is someone that Rick liked a little bit more than I did, but he's a long, rangy cornerback. I think he's a little stiff at times, probably primarily outside, but he adds some depth on day 3.
Yeah, no. I think that they went into this and they knew that they were going to be a much more physical team than they have been in the past. They're going to run a football and they want to stop the run. Drafting Colson, that's what this guy does. He's a very good Mike linebacker that goes sideline to sideline, can find the ball, good enough in coverage, and a Boogie B. From Alabama, the defensive tackle. This guy is a 5 technique, extremely explosive. I saw him plays with high energy, high effort. This is a hardball type pick. I wish they would have went with one more Michigan player. I'm a half a player short, so I don't know if that's...
From a push. We call that a push if you got a half a player there.
Yeah, I didn't know you can put a hook on a player.
Well, if you ask Pete Prisco, a kicker is a half a player, so that might have put money back in everybody's pockets.
He wants you to realize that he understands what hook means.
We got it.
I learned that last fall.
Yeah, there we go.
We got you guys on the hook. More coming here on CBS Sports HQ. First, a look at those odds, and to no surprise, it is the Chiefs to lose. Everybody wrote them off last season. They lost that game to the Raiders on Christmas. Well, there's going to be a ring ceremony early next season. Minus 230 the price if you like the Chiefs to do it again. More coming on HQ. We turn our attention to the AFC South next. It was a run-on offense to the first defensive name heard. He's headed to Indy. We are too. Stay put. Back on CBS Sports HQ, the age-old strategy of QB year one, tackle year two in play for the Tennessee Titans. A better-than-expected rookie campaign out of Will Levis urging Tennessee brass to scoop up some first-round insurance. Good as Geico, J.C. Latham, head to the Music City. Shout out to the sponsors. A shout out to our guys as well. Doing hard work, not just this week, this weekend, but all year long. Getting these names, getting these guys, and it didn't take long to get to J.C. Latham, Tennessee, scooping up the tackle that you loved in pre-draft and really headlined this group for Tennessee.
And don't forget, Joe, day 3, the working man's day. So no ties.
No ties.
And
Working man.
We're going at it. And J.C. Latham can be described as a working man, too. I gave the Titans a C+, not because of J.C. Latham, more because I, like the Joe Alt conversation before the break, if he's a right tackle only or right guard, which he also played at Alabama, can he play left tackle? And Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan apparently think that he can. So there's some uncertainty there. If it hits, it's an A+, but I have to grade it, so that's why I gave it the C+ as we sit here. T'Vondre Sweat, I thought was drafted too high, even if there weren't the off-field concerns from a few weeks ago prior to the actual draft. I don't know if you draft a 360-pound defensive tackle who's a two-down player. That said, and I said this last time on the podcast, Rick, when you line him up next to Jeffrey Simmons, maybe it looks a lot like when he lined up next to Byron Murphy, and that's something you can get behind.
Yeah. Yeah, excuse me. I don't know why you're going to question Bill Callahan.
That's true.
Who's probably the best offensive line coach maybe in the history of the NFL about saying that J.C. Latham can go over and play the left side, but that's your opinion. But we all, you know, the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. We all can improve.
How lovely.
Motivational speaker Rick is here.
Some of these guys down, I thought they were really good picks. Gray, the linebacker from North Carolina, very athletic, needs to get a little more physical taking on blockers, but is a 3-down linebacker. Jaquan Jackson, we both loved him. The slot receiver, I think, has got big playability for him. They continue to add weapons around Will Levis. Now they got an offensive tackle that can protect him. And then your guy, James Williams, who was a safety at Miami that converted to linebacker. We saw him play a little linebacker down at the Senior Bowl. That was a little rough in the transition, but I imagine they're going to put him at linebacker, try to develop him there.
Will Levis getting some help there. Not alone in that strategy. The Colts at some point going to tackle to protect Anthony Richardson, who we only got a glimpse of, but it was a fun glimpse early last season. Looking forward to what this year holds for that young man, a tackle and a wide receiver in those first 3 picks. But the first pick, Laiatu Latu, the edge out of UCLA, our first defensive player selected, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was the case. It was like weeks ago. Laiatu and the rest of this class, we've seen a lot of A's. This feels like a good class here out of the Colts once again.
Now, this is an A and bordering on an A+. Rick doesn't like pluses or minuses, but this class, Chris Ballard absolutely crushed it. You talked about Laiatu Latu to get edge rush help there. Sort of surprising that he was the first defender to go, but he is the most technically sound of the pass rushers in this class. A.D. Mitchell was somehow there in the second round. He is the first-round talent, and he's going to be a downfield threat to pair with what they have in Josh Downs, the slot receiver they drafted from a year ago. And, Rick, I know you like Matt Gonsalves out of Pitt. He's probably going to move inside. And then they got Tanner Bortolini, who has center guard versatility. So they're bolstering the offensive line on the inside to protect their investment in Anthony Richardson. And then they get another slot, a guy that I liked a little bit better than you, Anthony Gold out of Oregon State. Small receiver, small catch radius, but he does catch everything you throw to him.
Sometimes. He had a couple drops, especially coming inside, but I do like his athleticism and his speed when he does catch the ball after the catch. But I liked what Chris Ballard did. I mean, he's going to be another one of these GMs that don't care what anyone thinks. If I see a player up there, Latu, he had him as the #1 edge rusher because he had his option of going either with Verse or with Dallas Turner, but they felt Latu was the best edge rusher, so that's what he's going to do. And I thought they got a steal with A.D. Mitchell. I think he's still raw as a route runner, but his athleticism, his size, his ability to go downfield, we saw that in some of the clips. I think he's got it. And boy, was he mad. First time I've ever seen a guy get interviewed that was actually really mad that didn't go earlier. Usually you're pretty happy about it. And then Chris Ballard had one of those epic press conferences defending him and telling everybody else that they're full of BS. Why do we put these kids through it? So I imagine A.D. Mitchell's going to come in with a big chip on his shoulder to go along with Pittman, to go along with Downs last year. They should have some explosive weapons around Anthony Richardson.
The tangent conversations that come off of the draft, always entertaining. The sound bites that we get, they're fantastic. There were some sound bites coming out of Jacksonville last year that did not breed a whole lot of belief. Things sort of went sideways at the exact wrong time. How does this group change the way you're looking at Jacksonville next year?
Well, sound bites and visuals. Hopefully Tony Khan is okay with the neck brace. Hopefully that works out for the owner's son.
That was notable.
Yeah, he leaned into the bit for 3 full days, so shout out to him for that as well. But in terms of the Jaguars and their draft class, Rick, I gave it a B-. I love Brian Thomas Jr. We saw him down at the Pro Day when we were watching Malik and Jaden Daniels there. I wonder if they maybe missed out on an opportunity to get Terry and Arnold there. But again, they circled back and got 2 cornerbacks in Jerry and Jones in round 3. I didn't love him as a round 3 pick, but clearly the Jaguars started differently. And Deontre Price, out of Missouri. Javon Foster, the Missouri tackle, I like a little bit more than you do. I wonder if he has to kick inside. And then they did get defensive tackle help also from that LSU Pro Day, it turns out. Mason. I said Mason. He got me saying Mason Smith with a French accent because he
Mason.
And then
Mason Smith.
And then
oui.
So
don't let us get off your game. Stay in. Come on, stay focused. We got one more division to get through.
Right. So Monsieur Spielman, what do you think about this Jaguars draft class?
I don't know. I'm all flustered now. They needed to get speed at the receiver position because they got to get weapons for Trevor Lawrence. And when they lost Calvin Ridley to Tennessee, they needed to get the best receiver that could take the top off coverage. And to me, that was Brian Thomas Jr. Mason, as you like to say, I call him Mason Smith,
It's the double A.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Arik Armstead, who they signed from San Francisco when he got released. Big, long, physical, has a lot of upside. I think he still can develop as a pass rusher. He can play against the run. We saw him work out down at LSU's Pro Day. This guy can bend for a big guy. Reminded me a little bit of Barmore when he came out of Alabama. That's up there playing pretty well in New England right now. So I thought they did a good job. A couple of these as you go down, you're kind of like hoping that these guys can develop. They're solid, steady, but nothing splashy.
We're going to take a look at those odds in just a moment, but by my estimation, they're all chasing this next team in the Texans. Such a big step forward when they got it right twice over last year. Rookies of the year, both sides of the ball. Fantastic draft a year ago. How'd they follow it up here in the encore?
I gave him a B, and one of the talking points was that they were going to try early. Their first pick, as you see, there wasn't until pick 42, traded down from 23, that they might get a defensive tackle, and that lasted until day 3, late into day 3. The Marcus Harris pick there at 247, I actually liked him a lot. We saw him in the Senior Bowl. But let's start with Kamari Lassiter, Rick. He ran a 4.64 at his pro day. I thought he was bigger and faster on tape than what he measured. So clearly Houston felt similarly. Blake Fisher, the right tackle at Notre Dame. Huge upside guy, has yet to live that potential, but I love the fact that you're continuing to protect your investment in C.J. Stroud. And then, Rick, let's talk about Cade Stover, the tight end there. Another playmaker who played defense not too long ago, and I think his best football is in front of him.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Houston Texans went out and just gorged themselves into free agency. Trade for Stephon Diggs, go and sign Danielle Hunter, trading for Joe Mixon. So they went out there and spent most of their time trying to get that done. So now what they do, it's like, Joe, when you go to a meal and you're trying to fill in the cracks, so that's either with bread or salad. Okay. So this was a bread or salad type draft for me.
Oh, interesting.
They got some very good football players. The one kid that I really like is Kalen Bullock. He reminds me a little bit of, let me throw it back here, Reggie Nelson, except he doesn't tackle as well as Reggie Nelson did, but he came out of Florida. He was like a deep middle safety. This kid has a lot of range and ball instinct, so I thought it was a very solid draft, but it was more filling in the cracks than the meaty part. They ate the meat in the main course during free agency.
Got room for dessert?
We'll see.
Something sweet coming next. Plenty more on CBS Sports HQ. First, a look to see if I had it right. What's Vegas think about this division? Oh, had it right. Texans, your favorites at plus 105. Jags next closest, plus 270. But bunched up at the top three with conceivably good odds to win this division. And then there's the Titans, 8-1 value if you think they can surge. One more division to be done. It's the AFC North. Always a strong division with high-level QB play, but which team did themselves the most favors over the last 3 days? Find out next. Like mom in the grocery store back in the day, is it a want or is it a need? Wide receiver help a constant need in Baltimore, and the Ravens going with a player with some big-time potential in round 4, Tez Walker out of UNC. In 8 games last season for the Tar Heels, Walker had 41 catches for just shy of 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. Back in studio with two men always in high demand. Wilson, Rick Spielman here to dive into our last division, and we're going to start right there with the Ravens. It always feels like they're a little piece away. Total sum of this group, does that fill those needs to the point where you're looking at a true contender again in the Ravens? 100%.
This is an A all day for me, Rick. And Eric DeCosta continues to follow in the footsteps of Ozzie Newsome and just crush draft after draft. Nate Wiggins feels like a Raven. He's a little on the light side at 185. I don't even think he weighed that at the combine. But he is long, he is fast, and he can cover. Rosengarten protected the right side for Michael Penix Jr., which is his blind side, obviously. Adisa Isaac played opposite Chop Robinson. He is a juiced-up edge rusher who needs to get a little stronger at the point, but you can see the athleticism there. And then the athleticism continues with the next pick, Rick, with Tez Walker, who ran in the 4.3s. He's every bit of 6'2". He's not a natural catcher of the football, so that's something he needs to work on, but you just run go routes and let Lamar Jackson see if he can throw the ball farther than you can run.
Yeah, no, I thought, again, this is a very consistent Eric DeCosta's draft. Every time they follow their board, they're going to take the best players available, and it seems like the board falls to them every year where they also fill a need. Did they have a need at corner? Yes. Well, look, there's Nate Wiggins. We have a need at right tackle. We traded away Morgan. What? Look, there's Roger Rosengarten.
My goodness.
We need an edge rusher? No way. There's Adisa Isaac there. So it's just like every year. It's amazing to watch how the board falls to them, and they get good football players, and that's why they're winning year in and year out. Because they only spent on Derrick Henry. That was the only free agent they spent on this year. They're always going to build through the draft. This was another successful draft to build.
Ryan, give me that again. Who'd you say feels like a Raven?
Nate Wiggins, the very first pick.
Nate Wiggins feels like a Raven. Thankfully, and I take great pride in this, our friend Bryant McFadden once said, I host like a Steeler. I don't know if that's a, I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
That's 100% a compliment.
I'll play for Mike Tomlin any day of the week.
Yes, sir.
This was a draft that had clear direction. Protect Russell Wilson and try and win more football games up front. Such an issue for the Steelers these past seasons, whether pass blocking or run blocking. They were one of the worst in the NFL. They addressed that right off the top here in this draft.
Right, and to continue the Mike Tomlin / Joe Musso connection, I'll give you my favorite Mike Tomlinism.
Okay.
We're not asking for much, Joe. Just all you got.
All right.
And that's how
you got it.
That's how you run through a wall. A+ for the Mike Tomlinism. Right. A+ to the Steelers. Torrey Fautanu, he's going to run through a wall for you. Zach Frazier, same there. So the offensive line is already immeasurably better. You're adding, what's the math there? 40% improvement on the offensive line in terms of players. Roman Wilson fills that need. You circle back with Peyton Wilson on the other side. And Rick, we talked about Mason McCormick. One of our favorite matchups was watching Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa, go up against Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State, and that was a stalemate. And now he's a part of the Steelers again. More depth along that offensive line.
I don't think it's going to be hard to predict what type of offense that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to run. So, offensive lineman, offensive lineman, offensive lineman. They are going to run the ball. And I was looking down through here, Joe. If you look at all their draft picks, and all of a sudden we look at runs all the time. Corner runs, D-tackle runs. We saw a running back run. Well, this was a Wilson run. There was Roman Wilson, Peyton Wilson, and then with the 6th pick, it was Ryan Watts. So
yeah,
close.
We were close.
We were close.
Keep that phone close, though, because you
never know. Did they call you as a college free agent?
We're going to bring you in camp. We really like your upside, Ryan, but we can't make you any promises. We want you to come in and compete.
We're not asking for much. Just all you got.
Just all you got. These guys have given us all they have. 2 more teams to get to. The Bengals, our next one. A bevy of picks, volume again here. In the way that they approached it, when you have this many picks, you can really spray the board. That's sort of what it looked like here, but off the top, a tackle to protect the oft-injured Joe Burrow. What did you grade out here in Cincinnati?
B+.
Okay.
And they had needs, and they filled those needs. I had talked to a source prior to the draft, and I asked if Brock Bowers was there or if Amarius Mims is there, what's the direction you're going? Because Brock Bowers had been a popular choice for Cincinnati. He did not fall to that point. They said Amarius Mims. That's who they get. They get help along the defensive line, which they needed to do. Jermaine Burton would have gone much higher. He had some off-field issues. He is a downfield threat consistently. And they keep going to the tight end well here too, Rick. So Eric All, I didn't love him quite as much as he was drafted here. He had some injury concerns, but I absolutely love Tanner McLaughlin. We talked about him. Also had an injury, which is why he fell. But I think he has a chance to be a contributor. Both those guys do early on with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and the biggest need, besides the offensive tackle, was the defensive line and the defensive tackle position. And Chris Jenkins, to me, is as solid and as steady as you're going to get. He is very good against the run. He's very good rushing the passer. He's not exceptional in one area, but he's going to help you win games. And then McKinley Jackson, we saw him down at the Senior Bowl. He is probably Trevante Sweat light, maybe 10 pounds light. So just another big nose tackle that's going to be a two-down run stuff and nose tackle for them.
All right, we got the Browns to round things out here. Notably, in the third-round pick, 21, Zach Zender, the guard out of Michigan, injured late last season. This was a Michigan draft. I mean, there's no surprise to this. The national champions all over the board, including pick number 85 there, the interior lineman, going to Cleveland. Only one pick prior for Cleveland, 54. Defensive line help. Obviously addressing the trenches first and foremost here. What'd you make of the draft strategy, Ryan?
I love the draft strategy in terms of addressing needs. I gave them a B- in part because they had fewer picks than the other teams in that division. I thought the other teams did a better job of addressing more needs. Now, the Browns defense just got a whole lot better with Michael Hall Jr., and they were already in a good place under Jim Schwartz. He is incredibly twitched up. You see there, he's a little heavier than 280, I think, but not much. And the issue is he sometimes, as Rick will tell you, gets too high in his pad level, but I think he is twitchy and he can shoot gaps. Jamari Thrash adds something as a wide receiver. I like Nathaniel Watson a little bit as a linebacker, and I'll be interested to see how we see him used at the next level with Jim Schwartz. But just the lack of picks. And the other thing it comes back to for me, Rick, is that you still have to hit with Deshaun Watson because that's one of the reasons you don't have these picks. So that also has to factor into the equation.
Yeah, they built this a little differently. They don't have the draft capital that they had in the past when Sashi Brown was running it. They had 150 picks every year. But they addressed it by trading Jerry Jeudy. And again, you're correct. Deshaun Watson has to come through. But this is a pretty complete roster right now. So all these guys are kind of plug-and-play rookies that they want to develop and hopefully eventually play. I really like the Michael Hall Jr. I think he's going to give them some inline pass rush. If you look at their defensive tackles, and I was looking at this, you have Tomlinson, 30. Shelby Harris, 33. Quentin Johnson, 30s. So they got 3 defensive tackles that are older veterans, and to put youth in there like Michael Hall Jr. is definitely going to start helping rebuild and replenish that defensive line as these guys age out.
32 up, 32 down, a pair of 1-1s sitting next to me right here. The hard work, it's always appreciated, fellas. Ryan Wilson, Rick Spielman, great work as always as we take a look at the odds to win the AFC North. Some think anybody's division. Disrespect to the Steelers here? Ryan Wilson, a word?
Grossly disrespectful.
Disrespect. They're going to run the ball. Plus 750, the Browns 5-1 money. Bengals and Ravens, Vegas expecting to battle it deep into the season for this divisional title. Coming up, we shift gears to the hardwood. Could the Boston Celtics answer the call after giving one up to the Heat? Oh, they did. We take a look next on CBS Sports HQ.